Okay, this week we are starting out with the spring equinox. And before I go into that, I want to go back and I'm like a broken record player. At the beginning of April on the 12th, we're going to have that Neptune and Jupiter conjunction happen. And as we're moving into that conjunction over the next couple of weeks, this is really, it's moving into a balsamic phase. And we can say that it already is. So this is really about the purification process that happens whenever we become observant in our own lives. And the way that we can be observant in our own lives and the way that we can best impart change within our society and the community, and then in our own personal relationships, is by starting to look at the internal, not the external. So often we like to look at the external. Well, if I'm with this person, they make me feel this way. When I'm with this person, they don't meet my needs. And so it's all of this outsourcing that's really an illusion, when really the only way that we can change the world, enact and be in our purpose and facilitate growth in the collective is by starting with ourselves. And to do that, we have to be an observer of how we are in relationship with ourselves and how we are in relationship with others. And so I really challenge anyone over the next few weeks that to really look at not the other, but at self. Because when we do that, everything else falls into place. So with that being said, we are in this process of letting go, of tidying things up, of really getting rid of the thoughts and the beliefs and the values that stem from the thoughts and the beliefs that we carry with us that really don't serve us. This is really a time where we're looking at the conditioning of our nuclear families, where we come from, how that still affects us in the day-to-day in our relationship with self and in our relationship with others. We're also looking at how the conditioning of society affects us in relationship with ourselves and relationship with others. So a lot of the themes that I've been seeing and that I've kind of been talking about over the last couple of weeks have been dealing with really being an observer in your life. And I can't stress this enough. This is probably the most beneficial thing I've ever done in my own life, is to be an observer of myself. And it has taught me so much. And whenever we have self-knowledge, that becomes wisdom. And that is natural wisdom. It's not something that we can get from other people. We have been conditioned to outsource from other people, which is a very Libra type of archetype that really fits into this equinox and what's going on. So when we outsource from other people, we accumulate opinions from other people. And when we do that and we put an emphasis on how others feel or what they think, or society or our family, we disillusion ourselves and we start not living in the truth. We start to condition our own selves to really not live in our own personal truth. And there's such a disconnect and a disassociation from our personal truth whenever we're outsourcing what other people think or do, or their opinion, to the point where we've convinced ourselves that we aren't capable of doing things for ourselves, of thinking for ourselves. And the easiest way we can see that is when there's a choice that is needed to be made in our lives, a lot of times we can feel a sense of confusion. We know and we have a gut feeling or an intuition about what we need to do, but yet we go and we outsource and we seek validation from others to try to get their opinions. And most of the time, what ends up happening is it conflicts with what is trying to emerge from within us, our own personal truth, our own personal wisdom, our own personal path that we're trying to forge. And so when we become observers in our life and observers in our own relationship with self, we actually get to decondition ourselves from all of the inner chatter, and we get to actualize things in a really natural way instead of a very conditioned, distorted way. And so I'm going to go into this a little bit because these are a lot of the themes that are popping up. I keep seeing these phasal aspects that really have to deal with releasing, letting go, also integrating what has been learned, liberating from what doesn't serve us, from old habitual patterns, all of these things. And so I really feel like this is getting us really ready for this Neptune-Jupiter conjunction that's about to happen. And Neptune-Jupiter really wants us to see the truth, the actual truth, in order to be able to shape new beliefs, and new beliefs that are timeless within nature, that are formless, that are grounded in love and in compassion. And when they are grounded in love and in compassion, then it becomes formless. Whenever love is in form, we tend to have the unnatural expression of Libra, which is where everything has conditions. If you do this, then I'll do this. I have this expectation of how this relationship's supposed to go, or who I'm supposed to be, or who you're supposed to be in relationship and partnership, yada, yada, yada. And that is really an illusion, because there's an illusion that there's love there, when really there's not. All it does is continue to keep us separate from each other. And love is never rooted in conditions. It's just not. Love that has no strings and that is formless says, I want for you what I want for myself, which is compassion, joy, peace, and love. That doesn't mean that there's not bad days. There doesn't mean that there's not good days. There doesn't mean that bad things don't happen to good people. But it means that I can accept you for how you are and who you are. And if I love you, then that is good enough. You show me who you are. And as long as it's not harming me, like, that's always good enough. So let's take a look at the equinox to jump off. And then I'll kind of just go into some of the other things. There's very much, I always talk about the repeating signatures, the repeating themes. We always see this, like in either in someone's natal chart, in a relationship composite chart, in the forecast for astrology, because we need to remember that astrology isn't causative. It doesn't make things happen. I hear people talk about, like, when there's a Mercury retrograde, that's why blah, blah, blah happened. No, what is really true about astrology is it's only reflecting what is occurring within us. And there's different ways that can reflect. And this is another Libra theme that is really poignant to talk about, considering that whenever this equinox happened, the moon was in Libra. And what that is that there's the phenomenon of relativity. And that is definitely an archetype and a function of Libra. With Libra, we compare and we can contrast. with other people, to other people. That way we get to learn about who we are and who we are not, and what our needs are and what our needs aren't. But really the truth of everything is that there's more than one truth. Like, the truth just exists. There is multiple truths, and it is all relative. And whenever we realize that things are relative, then it really allows us to realize how each one of us is individual in nature as opposed to similar. And so I want you to keep in mind that there is validity in other people and what they are wanting and what they're desiring and what they're thinking, because it really is all relative. That can be a personal truth to them that is helping them along the way, but may not necessarily resonate with you. That doesn't mean that it's untrue. It just means that it's a relative thing. It just shows that we are really unique in the way that we go about our life on the day to day, the month to month, the year to year, and from lifetime to lifetime. So I wanted to bring that up. So let me show you the chart for the equinox, which happens on Sunday, March 20th at 10:34 a.m. And we can see that I've been talking about the archetypes of Libra and how that is relativity. That is also harmony, balance. It's the function and the psychological phenomenon of listening. It is being able to listen to people. These are all natural expressions of Libra, not distorted expressions. Whenever we're living in the natural expression of Libra, we are able to listen to someone's reality from where they're actually coming from, instead of through the filter of our perception that is really filtered through our own experiences and upbringing and conditioning. And whenever we are naturally embodying Libra, we're able to really hear what someone needs as opposed to what we think that they need. This is also really balancing the divine masculine and the divine feminine. This is not the patriarchal distortions or the internalized misogyny of that. So on this day, in this minute, is whenever the sun goes into Aries. And that signifies the mark of the astrological new year, for one, and also in the northern hemisphere, the spring equinox, and in the southern hemisphere, the fall equinox. And so when we look in astrology, we always have polarities. And that is just in life. That is what helps us evolve, is through paradoxes and polarities and the antithesis of different things. And it's really to get us to learn new ways to metamorphose these natural expressions of these archetypes as a way to now integrate them. And that, when we are able to do that, helps us to live in balance and in harmony with ourselves, with others, with nature, with God, creatress, with everything. So Libra moon on this day is squaring the Pluto that is in Capricorn. So on the one hand, with this sun entering Aries, it signifies a new chapter. And on the other hand, this square that the moon is having with Pluto signifies the ending of a cycle. And this is a theme that we keep seeing, and that I've kind of talked about when you hear me talk about the different phases and whatnot. And with this square, it is in a last quarter square. Dane Rudyard, who is an astrologer, he talked about this phase in saying that it was a crisis in consciousness or a crisis in belief. So when I look at this, for some people with this square, this could be a crisis in belief or consciousness that has to deal with outsourcing others' opinions and feeling really confused about what to do. How am I supposed to do X, Y, Z? What should I do? And it's really about learning how to look inward instead of outsourcing from the external. And it's about learning to connect with your inner voice and your intuition, because ultimately that is connected to creatress. It is something much larger. And when we trust that, we are able to strengthen our spiritual relationship with our higher self and with creatress. And so there can be a moment in this week, in the upcoming weeks, that is really signaling for you to, on the one hand, start a new cycle, but on the other hand, before you can do that, you have to kind of have involution before you can have evolution. And it is, the energetics of this week are all about releasing conditioning and releasing the distortions that have been upheld within that conditioning and how we have internalized those as beliefs and made them our own personal values. We have an inconjunct to the Aries sun, and this inconjunct is also really about the adjustment on how you view or categorize your feelings and your emotions. This inconjunct is asking for action. It's crisis in action as opposed to crisis in consciousness or belief. And so it's really asking for all of us to quit outsourcing and to really look at the ways that our conditioning is getting in the way of us actualizing what we came here to do, what our specific purpose is, or what lesson we're supposed to be integrating and actualizing right now. This is really about learning how to let go of codependent tendencies. And it's one thing to mentally understand this, but a lot of dissonance can happen whenever there's Aquarius at play here, which is the moon is ruled by Venus, and Venus is in Aquarius. And so there is this call to action, to liberate from old values that no longer serve us, that stem from our conditioning, from our nuclear families and from society. And how is this getting in the way of what we're trying to and what we desire to do as a way to be part of the collective? Going back to that Pluto being in Capricorn and this square from the moon to it, this is also about learning how to claim your own authority. And how we go about doing that is by deconditioning ourselves, learning how to think for ourselves. What are my actual values? What are my actual beliefs about myself? What are my needs that stem from these values? What do I need from others? What do I need from myself? What conditioning have I internalized around gender roles and the norms of gender roles? And how is that conditioning getting in the way of me living my purpose and actualizing it? So I've already talked a little bit about how Libra represents what's relative and how each person has validity. So now we need to ask ourselves, what extremes have we been living in that have been keeping us from living in our authentic self, having our authentic desires? Maybe some of us aren't even in touch with what our authentic desires are, what's natural what our natural desires are, because there's such a distortion and from the suppression. These are all Capricorn kind of qualities that stem from the judgment of those around us, from our society and from our nuclear families. What is getting in the way of us doing these things? Is it because I'm afraid that if I do this, then I'm going to be judged? Am I afraid of what other people will think? And that is just not living in the truth. What we're wanting to do this week is to really wipe away these conditionings. And the only way for us to be in touch with that is to do the Venus and Aquarius thing, is to really observe ourselves and relationship with self and relationship with others. It's not when this person does this, blah, 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 blah. It's, oh, I feel this feeling in me, and where'd that come from? I wonder what that's about. Oh, and why is it that way? And what does that mean? And then what does that mean? That way we can really have the truth revealed to us. That way we can finally rebel and liberate ourselves from things that we've been carrying around and have cloaked ourselves in for far too long. A lot of this can be also self-fulfilling prophecies. Like, you were told if at this point in your life you weren't doing X, Y, or Z, or if you didn't do it this way, that you were going to, for example, I remember growing up, my parents, they would tell me that I was going to become a drug addict, get pregnant at a young age, and become a burger flipper if I didn't do X, Y, and Z. And what ended up happening was those things came true because I believed it, and they were not in line with my value system. So it's kind of like these archetypes coming about, or in partnership with another, not really knowing how to verbalize or explain our truth, what I'm needing, how I'm feeling. And so later on this day, Mercury conjuncts Jupiter, and this gets us in touch with the truth of what is occurring inside of us, what is really authentic, what we might be buying into as an illusion, what we might have bought into as an illusion because of the definition that has been conditioned on us. This can be partnerships of all varieties. Oh, when I'm in relationship with you, I have this expectation that you're going to be this way and I'm going to be this way, when really those expectations come from and stem from distortions of values that aren't even natural to us. And so therefore we suppress our natural desires. This day is all about looking at this, releasing those. It's also about learning and postulating what, well, now that I know that this doesn't feel right, what is my actual value? What are my actual beliefs? What do I actually need? Because a lot of us walk around in partnerships and we don't really know these things. So if we are not in touch with these things, then how can we really ask for them in a way that is authentic and honest? How are we really going to know if a person is able to do that? We are not living in an authentic partnership that's in harmony and balance. It's more of an outsource. It's because of the illusion that this person makes me feel this way when they do what I think they're supposed to do, when they match my expectation of them, which couldn't be further from the truth a lot of times. So I wanted to also talk about how this moon is in an anaretic degree. An anaretic degree means that it's at the very end of a sign. It's at the 29th degree. This also just repeats the theme of a chapter wanting to close, a cycle wanting to close. And this really stems from any type of codependent and mesh type of dynamics that are going on with inside of you. And the outsourcing that has been playing a part in your life because you have these expectations, because you have, I'm going back over all of this again because I really want to hammer it in. because you have bought into the illusion that how we define a certain relationship, it's supposed to go this way. So there's this crisis in action and there's this crisis in belief. So it's about really figuring out what your beliefs and values are and then putting it into action, right? And a lot of times we fear putting things into action because there's safety in what's familiar. And the issue with all of this Pisces kind of energy is that it is inevitable that if you resist what your soul is speaking to you to do, and you are allowing fear to get in the way of that instead of leaning into it and riding the fear, not suppressing it, because you can't get rid of it. You can only ride it. Whenever you are resisting this desire that your soul is having, this push for you to do something else, it is inevitable that disillusionment is going to set in, and it is inevitable that a crisis will then ensue. And so please do not resist what these things are. This is all about you really coming into a deeper relationship with yourself, which in turn spiritualizes all of us, because we get to have a deeper relationship with source. Because whenever we trust our higher self, we're trusting source, because it's all interconnected. Another repeating signature, this moon is in a waning gibbous. This is about release. This is about decreasing things. This is about letting go. This is about letting go of old habits, old beliefs. This is about allowing new values and beliefs to come forth, because we're clearing out the old. And so this is happening until, I believe, the 24th of this week. And so there's this clearing out that is wanting to happen, this decrease of outsourcing, okay? There's this eliminating of outsourcing and codependency and enmeshment, and really the illusion that my value stems from how great my relationship is, how great my partner treats me, how what I'm doing in this world. None of that really matters. The only thing that really matters is, and it's symbolized in this inconjunct, is that we are following Creatress's lead. When we do that, there's something that's intrinsic to each one of us that we're supposed to be doing. And when we do that, we don't become attached with the outcome anymore. We are able to have this intention and know what we're supposed to do, and then we do it and we let it go, and we let it just be, and let the truth of whatever that was express itself in the way that Creatress is wanting it to be expressed. So with this Venus being the moon's ruler, this is for us to further look at where we've been conforming to someone else's or to society's standards and values, and really releasing them. And the Leo polarity of this Venus is about creatively actualizing what it is that we're supposed to creatively actualize. It's also about taking action to do that. It's not about just having these ideas of what we should do and then stopping and not doing it. It's actually putting in the effort and the work and devotion to do this. So therefore, something becomes more concrete instead of just a thought. So it's really about learning to take our own authority and to take action to implement that into our own lives. So there's that, I talked a little bit about the balsamic conjunction with Jupiter and Mercury. And so this is really about like speaking your piece, speaking your truth, having that be illuminated for you, really shedding existing conditioning, anything that is man-made, that is not natural. It is about releasing that. It's about having the desire to learn about that. It's having the desire to learn about the categories and the definitions that we give things, and how that creates an illusion and expectations that are idealistic in nature. This is really about being able to speak one's piece. And it's about speaking one's piece in order to start the new cycle, in order to start a new chapter, and in order to really integrate all of this stuff. There's something about speaking and letting things out and putting that energy into the world that really clears the path for something. I'm going to stop share, that way we can just talk. So on the 22nd, there is the Mars in Aquarius squares the Uranus and Taurus. This is really about continuing to liberate ourselves from the values that we hold that are not true to who we are, that are not values that we really hold. Like, as an example, maybe, okay, I just did a video on, and I interviewed and looked over the chart of someone who has a polycule and who's polyamorous and has multiple relationships. And so their values are very different than what society has conditioned them to believe. So this is really about liberating oneself from any type of conditioning and going after our natural desires and not suppressing them anymore, and not feeling guilty or bad about having these desires, because they are natural and that they are not bad. They aren't wrong. We may have been taught that they are, but they're really not, and that they all serve a purpose. There's a desire for why. There's a reason why we have the desire to do something, to actualize something, to go about something, whether it's sexually, or it's in partnership, or within our role that we play in the world, or if it's just with ourselves. There is a reason why we have these natural desires, and they are not meant to be suppressed. And so this square is in a last quarter square. So it's asking, what have you repressed that you naturally desire? What do you need to get in touch with? What are the distortions that have now clouded your judgment and made you feel guilty about your desires? How can you go about actualizing these desires in a natural way? How do these desires fit into your natural values about yourself and your natural needs? This last quarter square is another crisis in belief, crisis in consciousness. And we can see how that would take shape if we are conditioned to think that our natural desires are bad. We would have this crisis in our consciousness of, can I even act on these? Is it bad to act on these? And this is really, Mars being in Aquarius is having the desire to think for oneself. And so stepping up to the plate and really thinking for oneself. That way you can get rid of and rebel and liberate from all of that stuff that is not in alignment and in harmony and in balance with who you are as a person. It is not what is natural for you. So the archetype of this could be centered around society's gender roles, how they define them. It could be, centered around your belief systems that are not in alignment with society's. It could be centered around your desires to creatively do something out in the world that maybe your nuclear family or society has conditioned you to think that isn't, you know, isn't good or doesn't have any substance. Like, I had a desire to be an astrologist, and there was a lot of conditioning that told me that I shouldn't be doing that, that that was bad, and that I needed to hide, and that I needed to suppress that. And that could not be farther from my natural truth. So it's kind of things like this, and really taking a look at them and asking yourself, like, is this really bad? Or is this, have I been conditioned to think that this is bad? It's all about being in observation with yourself so you can really learn about yourself. So on the 23rd, Mercury and Neptune conjunct at 23 degrees Pisces. This is another balsamic conjunction. This is a way to really take into account the things that we have bought into, the illusions, the definitions of these things that are really illusionary in nature, that have created idealisms, that have then created expectations, that have then created disillusionment because we resisted, because we bought into thinking that this was a truth when ultimately it wasn't. And then a crisis has occurred. If something like this that really is a repeating signature from the past pops up for you, really take a look at it. Be curious. Why is this going on? Ask yourself, what am I resisting that I'm not understanding? With Pisces, if you ask for something, if you want it to be revealed to you, and you ask Creatress, God, Goddess, Gaia, whomever, please reveal to me what it is that I'm not understanding. It will be revealed to you. As long as you have the curiosity and you're open to it, it will be revealed. And then you can integrate whatever that wisdom is. So later on that day, that conjunction sextiles the North Node in Taurus and trines the South Node in Scorpio. There's two different sextiles that are going on, and there's two different trines. I'm not going to really go into them because there's two different planets that are in conjunction. There's two different types of sextiles going on to one node and two different types of trines going on to another one. And this is just a repeating signature of really release and integration. On the one hand, what are you releasing that you've been too rooted in, that's not in alignment with your values, with your personal truth? What needs to now be grounded and rooted, that is in authenticity, and that you want to, you know, enact and put out into the world. And instead of talking the talk, kind of walk the walk as well. The trines are also to the South Node in Scorpio. This is about really what psychological content needs to be released, and what psychological content do you need to look at to be released? What is causing some type of internal struggle or crisis? And what now can be disseminated into your life? What can now be actualized because you've had some realization of something? And the biggest thing with the sextile and the trines is that because they're considered more easy aspects, there can be a bit of laziness, and sometimes there can be resistance. This is kind of the window that's like, hey, if you do this, this will happen a lot easier for you, and it kind of sets a foundation of ease. Whenever you resist it, there's not some big consequence that happens, but what ends up happening is we become too grounded in whatever it is that we are resisting, and then crisis can ensue later on. And so really, whatever is coming up for you on this day, the 23rd, go ahead and follow your higher self's lead. Let go of something, integrate something. Unroot yourself in one thing, ground yourself in another. And all of this, like letting go and then integrating of new, is really a purification. This is about you becoming the person whom you're supposed to be, not whom society or your nuclear family thinks that you should be, or what you've bought into the illusion of who you're supposed to be. This is really an opportunity to purify any of those things. That way you can live in your authentic self. So on that day, the moon in Sagittarius squares Jupiter. So are you now going to put all of your beliefs into fruition and incorporate them? And the values that stem from them, or are you going to go back with what is familiar? It just repeats that signature. So this is, these are potent energies because it really is about this purification process. And the only way we can purify it is by observing. That way we can see the truth as it unfolds. So on the 24th, the moon in Capricorn will square the sun in Aries. And there is a naturally occurring square from Capricorn to Aries that really asks us, what have you been repressing that has to deal with society's conditioning? And so this is like another day to be working on these themes, to really just go into this observation. This week is observing what wants to be released that has to do with conditioning that has kept you separate from really knowing who you are and from participating in healthy and balanced relationships. There's this sense of dogma that can happen with all of this Pisces, which is like, I know this to be true. And really the truth is that everything can be true. It's that beginning of the week, that Libra moon telling you that everything is relative. So it's really more about you figuring out what is true for yourself and not relying on other people to tell you that. It's learning to think for yourself, which once you start doing this, you're going to really understand how much we don't. That's what I learned. And the other people who have been observing themselves in relationship to themselves that I've talked to, they have had similar things occur. So the very next day, the moon in Capricorn trines the Taurus Uranus. So whatever came up for us the day before and signaled to the internalized conditioning that we've been holding on to, this is the day to really let it go. Do a ritual, like be out in nature, sit with nature. All of this kind of Taurus and Uranus that's going to be there for much longer. And these nodes that are transiting, this is like, there's so much power that can come from just sitting out in nature and allowing things to come to us, to feel and embody the natural wisdom that comes from the interconnectedness that we are able to observe in nature, because therefore it allows us to observe it within ourselves. So this is a day to really liberate and rebel from all of this conditioning that you've been observing about yourself this whole week. And now that way you can clear the path for the new and you can live in your authenticity. So this is your week, and it starts with the equinox. And I know that I keep saying observe, 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 but this is really what we should be doing, especially leading up to this Neptune-Jupiter conjunction, because things can be misty. They can be foggy. They can be hazy. We can think that something's the truth and it's really an illusion with all this Pisces. And the only way to get to the bottom of it is to really just focus on ourselves and observe what is coming up for ourselves. And when we do that, there is a reckoning, a reconciliation of understanding what we're carrying around that is not ours, that we have really bought into, that it's what we believe. And it's because we've been so conditioned. And a lot of this is going to deal with the expressions of the natural feminine and the natural male masculine. If we look at society and the things and the conversations that are coming up right now, it's very much in line with this. And we have some people who are super rooted in their conviction that is almost dogmatic. And really what it does is it's creating separation because it's creating judgment. And so these are the types of like energies we want to be observing within ourselves. So I hope you have a good week. I hope that you stay in observation of yourself. I hope that you get to learn who you are on a deeper level. I hope that you get to connect with that. I hope that you are able to know that you can be an autonomous human being and that happiness comes from that. And happiness never comes from outsourcing and being too attached to anything or a pat on the back or a certain outcome. Whenever we are living in observance of ourselves, we get to live in our authenticity and we get to live in our natural wisdom. And then we get to just show up on the stage of humanity and the world, and we get to show people what authenticity is because we're now vibrating on a different level. And therefore, you're going to attract different people into your life. They're going to be people who can actually meet your needs. They're not going to be people who can't. They're going to be people who, when you say, this is who I am, they aren't going to try to fix it. There's not going to be conditions. They're going to be like, that's so awesome. I love who you are. This is who I am. And they're only going to want what they want. What they want for you is what they want for themselves, is to live in their highest, most natural expression on a soul level. So do some rituals this week. Definitely clear out old energies, fire, using fire, taking Epsom salt baths is a really good way to also get out the toxic energies that a lot of us have been carrying around because of our conditioning that is really like poison to our bodies. And I want you guys to remember and to continue whatever is synchronistic in your life that keeps popping up, whatever thought that keeps popping up, that has popped up more than once or twice, that is truly your higher self. Lean into that. Even if you're afraid, lean into it. Get curious, get excited. There's something that your soul is wanting to convey to you. And the more you rely on that and the more that you listen to that, the more that you see that there's no separation between your soul and who you are. So I love all of you and have a good week.